My name is John Kenny, and I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature Organization, and I'd like to welcome you to the 2025 Iowa City Book Festival. Thank you for joining us this evening. So before we start, I would like to thank some sponsors and partners that make this event possible. The City of Iowa City, the University of Iowa, Iowa City Public Library, the Coralville Public Library, Prairie Lights Bookstore, Iowa Public Radio, Think Iowa City, the Greater Iowa City, Inc., and the West Bank Foundation. Support is also provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Iowa Arts Council, which exists within the Iowa Economic Development Authority. Iowa City Book Festival events are open to everyone and available at no cost, but they rely on your support. Please consider donating to the City of Literature by visiting iowicityofliterature.org and clicking the button that says support. So today we will hear from author Steve Kemp. Iowa City native Steve Kemp has spent most of his adult life working in national parks. A graduate of the University of Montana's writing program, Kemp has written for magazines including National Parks, Outside, Outdoor Life, and Smokies Life Journal, and he's the author of Trees of the Smokies, Great Smoky Mountains Simply Beautiful, the forthcoming The Blue Ridge Parkway in celebration of the American landscape, and the children's book We're Going to the Mountains. Do you sense a theme there? America's national parks are facing unprecedented challenges. With visitation pressures mounting and the National Park Service struggling to keep up, Kemp looks toward one exceptionally effective historical example of conservation, philanthropy, and park building, the collaboration between John D. Rockefeller and National Park Service legends Stephen Mather, Horace Albright, and Arno Cammerer, a partnership that transformed some of America's most cherished national parks, including Acadia, Grand Teton, Great Smoky Mountains, Yellowstone, and Yosemite. It also recounts Rockefeller's lifelong dedication to conservation, digging into his own pockets and toiling as a volunteer to achieve his goals for converting prairie land into public use. Sounds like somebody we could use today. So please help me welcome Steve Kemp.
Thanks, John. It's really an honor and pleasure to be here. As John said, this is my hometown. And this is my new book, An Exaltation of Parks. Does that title remind anyone of any other books? Come on, somebody. So, okay, yeah. What book would that be? An Exaltation of Parks. Very good. See, most people don't get that inside joke, so it probably wasn't a great idea to title my book off an inside joke, but I still love the phrase. I love the book. It's a book about very poetic names for groups of animals and people. For example, crows. Everybody knows what a group of crows is, right? A murder of crows. Okay, up to the next level, ravens. An unkindness of ravens. Isn't that great? Blue jays is good too. It's a scold of blue jays. A swoop of swallows. And since we're in a library, guess what a group of readers is called? This is a good one. A browse of readers. Yeah. So for me, it all started in Hickory Hill. And for anybody here from Friends of Hickory Hill, let's give them a big hand. Yeah. Great park, great organization, thanks to the city too. It's really not an exaggeration to say that I grew up in Hickory Hill. My sister's here, she can attest. Very little time was spent at home other than sleeping and eating. After school, weekends, I was always in Hickory Hill. Loved it, did everything. This was back in the frontier days of Hickory Hill, so we even built tree houses and little shelters and ran amok, just as kids did before social media and video games and a lot of other things. We had the only thing we had to play with was Hickory Hill, and we did it a lot, and we had a really great time. And Hickory Hill became my springboard for a lifetime in the national parks. I went to Grand Tetons, became a ranger in Yellowstone, worked in Denali, Great Smoky Mountains. And once you're a ranger, you're allowed to terrorize infants. So that's really one of the very best parts of the job. But the parks with the asterisks beside them are all parks influenced or mostly created by John D. Rockefeller Jr. I met a park ranger in a national park, and she was a wonderful woman, and I married her. And we got married in a national park, in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We, in a grove of old-growth trees. We took our honeymoon in Acadia, also a Rockefeller National Park, and rode the carriage roads built by John D. Rockefeller Jr. And all this time spent in national parks, especially those influenced by John D. Rockefeller Jr., I had the gradual awakening of how important he was to the national parks, what a debt we owed him, how grateful I was for his creating all these parks. And also realized that his model of working with the parks, collaborations between himself, philanthropists, the National Park Service, and grassroots citizens organizations was an extremely powerful model. And that our national parks today probably are in crisis, really, really difficult situation at this moment. Not even just this moment, even before 2025. It was a difficult situation, just with ever-increasing visitation. Parks are really crowded these days. I mean, we live a mile from the Great Smoky Mountains, and we can barely get in there most of the years. Most of the year, Glacier requires reservations. Rocky Mountain requires reservations. Arches requires reservations or timed entry. It's really crowded. I volunteer in the visitor center. People want to go to certain trailheads, certain hikes. Tell them, yeah, you're going to have to get there before 7 o'clock. And that's true. I mean, these big trailheads with 100 parking spaces are all filled up by 7 o'clock in the morning. It's sad because a lot of people aren't getting to enjoy their parks. They're getting trampled. I mean, there's just social trails all over the place now. There's graffiti. There's vandalism. There's just the infrastructure was made for about 1/10 of the visitation that we're seeing in the parks right now. While visits continue to go up, staffing continues to go down. This 25% reduction was before 2025. It's been another, just in 2025, it's been another 24%. So, I mean, does Starbucks do that? Boy, business is good. What should we do? Reduce staff? Starbucks might do that, but they probably wouldn't, and national parks shouldn't be doing that either. And it's not like they're terribly expensive, relatively speaking. All the national parks, Alaska, Hawaii, American Samoa, Yellowstone, all these magnificent parks, over 400 parks, the cost to run those, to operate those, is 1/15 of 1% of the federal budget. Of course, with actually the tax cut bill, that's probably a lot closer to 1/20 of 1% right now. I mean, who here would give 1/2 of 1% of the federal budget for the national parks? Would that be money well spent? So there's really no rhyme or reason to it. But the heart of the story is the Rockefellers. John D. Rockefeller Sr. was the richest of all the Gilded Age plutocrats. He cornered the oil market. He is a rags to riches story. Just started out as a 16-year-old beating the streets, trying to get a job at a grocery store. Worked his way up. Pretty soon he had 100,000 employees. Nobody can really explain how that worked, but it did. He's a very aggressive business person. A lot of people forget, though, that he made his fortune off kerosene, not gasoline, because cars hadn't been invented yet. The Gilded Age started right after the Civil War. So his product was actually used for lamps, for illumination. And in the evolutionary history of humanity, the invention of kerosene was actually a pretty big step forward because people could do things at night now. They could read, they could work. And it also replaced whale oil. So it kept on getting more expensive as whales became more scarce. So if you were a whale, you were really completely pro-kerosene. And Senior was different than your stereotypical Gilded Age tycoon. Very religious, Northern Baptist, very quiet, very reserved, not a socialite in any sense, hung out with his church people, very frugal, hated to spend money, hated to waste money. He'd spend money on philanthropy, spent a lot more money on philanthropy than he did on himself. But yeah, to him, wasting money was a sin. And his son wasn't a very good businessman at all. He was shy, awkward, kind of fragile, prone to depression, but also very purpose-driven, very religious, also a teetotaler, lifetime teetotaler. He had some skills that made him a really amazing conservationist, and those were just this sense of purpose. Rockefellers felt like their money wasn't really theirs. It was to be used for what God would see as the right purpose to use that money. And their mission statement for their humongous philanthropy, mostly for education, healthcare, and religious purposes, was simply for the good of humankind. Very broad, very simple. Early on, the Rockefellers' happy place was in Ohio, believe it or not. They had this beautiful 700-acre summer place. It's where Junior and Senior bonded by building carriage roads. That was the beginning of landscape architecture in America. So they really got interested in building these really carefully crafted roads that conformed to the landscape, yet still offered the user a series of experiences like views and wildflowers and big trees, meadows. And Junior, like I said, was fragile. He had some catastrophic nervous breakdowns in his youth. And when he had these nervous breakdowns, he always came back to Forest Hill, to nature, to recuperate. That was his Hickory Hill, was Forest Hill. And he would cut wood, he'd build carriage roads, he would plant trees. Just doing this manual labor is how he recuperated. A really smart thing he did was marry Abby, who was completely unlike the rest of the Rockefellers. She was the yeast in the Rockefeller bread. She was an extrovert. She was witty. She was happy. While the rest of the Rockefellers were always pretty reserved, very formal. Junior never called anyone by their first name. Maybe Abby, but it was always Mr. or Mrs. They had six healthy, purposeful children, and the most impactful as far as national parks and conservation goes was Nelson, future Vice President of the U.S. Abby was pregnant with Nelson in spring of 1908. She was having a difficult pregnancy, and she and John Jr. were vexed when their doctor announced that he was going to be spending the summer in Maine and couldn't be there for the delivery. So they were upset, but of course being Rockefellers, if they wanted to, they could have pressed the issue, but they didn't. They weren't that kind of people. They just looked at each other and said, well, it looks like we'll be spending the summer in Maine too, with Dr. Thompson. So off they went to Mount Desert Island, Maine. At the time, it was kind of a Gilded Age millionaires retreat, like the Hamptons or Newport, Rhode Island. Nelson was born. He was healthy. Abby recovered, but the Rockefeller family really took to Maine, really took to Mount Desert Island in Maine, and they found this cozy little cottage. Happened to be for sale, so they moved into that. The whole family used that. The Airy for decades. Junior started building carriage roads. Nothing Junior liked more than building carriage roads, except maybe riding on carriage roads with Abby at his side. They're very happy there during the summers, but as time went on, Mount Desert Island just became more and more popular. People were building summer homes all over the place in not very conservation-minded places, like right on the ocean, right on the lakes, right on tops of the mountains. And so this grassroots conservation group formed. The Hancock County trustees started buying up land. They started accepting donations of land. And after many years, they'd amassed 3,000 acres of land for this just preserve open to the public. The shakers and movers were George B. Dorr. He was a very passionate, eccentric bachelor who lived on the island, and Charles Eliot. He was actually the father of one of America's first conservationists. And they knew everybody. George B. Dorr was so passionate about his preserve that he spent the family fortune on it, sold all his homes and assets in Boston, and went into debt just for this preserve. But as time went on, the realtors and the loggers and people started kind of probing the legality of this preserve, and they realized that they might find a way to dissolve the whole thing so it would go back on the market. They became very agitated. George B. Dorr came up with the idea, let's give it to the federal government. Let's have it become a national park. So he jumped on the next train, went to Washington, D.C., gathered up all his maps and his deeds, went to Washington, D.C., looked for the office of the National Park Service. Could not find it. It's like, where is this place? Why can't I find it? There were national parks. There were quite a few national parks at the time. There was no National Park Service. Hadn't been invented yet. Yet these two guys, Albright and Mather, were trying to create the National Park Service in 1914, and they talked to George B. Dorr, and they suggested that he create a national monument, not a national park, but a national monument, because they're much easier to create. You didn't have to have congressional buy-in to create a national monument. This, by the way, creating national monuments, 1906 Antiquities Act, also called the Lacey Act, is named after John Lacey from Iowa. One of the great conservationists of the 20th century was John Lacey, eight times Republican U.S. congressman, and he was brilliant. He really made Teddy Roosevelt the conservationist that he became. But they also mentioned that his plan for this national monument had some holes in it. The deeds would have to be verified back like 200 years. His boundaries weren't good. They were irregular. They didn't really make sense. There were inholdings within the boundaries. So Mather and Albright told George B. Dorr that he'd have to go back to work on this, verify the deeds, get some lawyers, buy more land. And Dorr was tapped out. Eliot didn't really have any money. He was president of Harvard, had a lot of connections, but no money. So, they were kind of stumped. What are you going to do? Going to need a lot of money, a lot of lawyers, a lot of land. Who are you going to call? Well, John D. Rockefeller Jr. lived just down the road, the richest guy in the world. So it was a no-brainer to go to Junior, tell him about this plan to create a national monument on the island. And Junior's first reaction was, why would we want to do that? I mean, this was a zillionaire's private estate because it was quiet and peaceful. And the Rockefeller estates were actually always open to the public, remarkably enough. But still, it was their land. They could do with it what they wanted. And here was this group saying, well, let's give it to the American people. But then they started, talking to Junior and talking about how conservation and national parks were good for the public and good for the country. And actually, by the way, we're going to need a lot of carriage roads there. A lot of carriage roads. So he jumped right on that, gave a lot of money, built a ton of carriage roads. But as time went on, he also began to see the light about not just being this gazillionaire's retreat where people trotted around in carriages, because the townspeople and the tourists wanted to drive in cars. They didn't have 3 days to go up to Cadillac Mountain and see the the sunrise. They wanted to run up to Cadillac Mountain, see the sunrise, and come back in time for Sunday dinner. And he began to see their point of view. It's like, you know, the Rockefeller family isn't about saving nice places for rich people. And it was kind of the old world vision of conservation versus the new world. As you recall, in the old world, the lords and barons and dukes and duchesses owned all the land, and the peasants were not allowed on the land. And if they got caught on the land, they could be arrested and jailed. If they got caught with a stag or a pheasant, they actually might be put to death. So Junior was going through a transition there from kind of an old world lover of nature, as long as he owned it, to seeing a bigger picture. He actually started building motor roads, hated cars. Ironically, he was a Rockefeller, Standard Oil, absolutely hated cars. In New York City, the one car he drove most of the time was an electric vehicle. Loved horses. And like I said, he was a perfectionist, so when he was building like Ocean Drive, part of the loop road system in Acadia, there was a Navy station out on one of the peninsulas. And you know, he's a perfectionist. He said, well, that's going to block the view from people using this motor road. I wonder if I can get the Navy to move it. And of course, the Navy thought he was kidding, but they kept working on it, and Rockefeller and the Department of Interior, the Park Service, built a road out to where it would be another place to relocate the Navy station. And they dug wells there, and they had it tested to make sure it was a good place for the Navy station. Started building housing there. Great officer housing. The officer housing actually looked like the millionaires' cottages on Mount Desert Island. Even the enlisted men got these beautiful apartment complexes. And sooner or later, the Navy decided to move that out to the Scudic Point. And Rockefeller just, you know, seamlessly melded with these Park Service people. He was like an employee. He just, you know, worked hand in glove with them on all these projects at Acadia. And the family's still there today, and they're still supporting Acadia National Park. Meanwhile, in the Great Smoky Mountains, 1923, Ann Davis and her husband Willis Davis go on a summer vacation to Yellowstone. They take the train. On the train ride back, Ann says to Willis, you know, we've seen some nice country. Yellowstone was fine and all, but I think our Great Smoky Mountains are just as beautiful, maybe even more beautiful. Why don't we have a national park in the Great Smoky Mountains? Willis, he was a very cooperative husband, said, well, if that's the way you feel, dear, I'll get right on it. And they did get right on it. They became evangelical for this park in the Great Smoky Mountains. Started talking to everybody. Willis was already the chairman of the board for all the auto clubs and the Chamber of Commerce and everything. Created a new organization just to create this national park. The people of the city were all excited about it, all around the area, not because they were great conservationists, but because they wanted a tourist attraction, their backyard. This was Appalachia, economically stressed area, and they wanted a tourist attraction. They wanted tourists, they wanted hotels, they wanted gas stations, diners. They wanted economic stimulus, which is the reason a lot of national parks were created. There were conservationists too, the hiking clubs. They got tired of hiking the tops of mountains and seeing nothing but clear-cut virgin forest. An author who lived in the area, Horace Kephart, author of Camping and Woodcraft and Our Southern Highlanders, an Iowan, by the way, great writer, really helped get the Boy Scouts of America going, and some photographers, they jumped on the bandwagon as well. There are a number of hurdles they had to immediately confront, however. One was there were 30 other communities in the central and southern Appalachians that also wanted a national park in their backyard, mostly for the economic development of it. Everybody wanted a national park. So the Department of Interior formed this committee, Southern Appalachian National Park Committee, to do like a beauty pageant, to go out and review all these areas, talk to the people, and they were just going to crown one or two with the very prettiest of areas. So they were already out there going around when the Smokies boosters caught wind that they were meeting over in Asheville at the Grove Park Inn, or Asheville, North Carolina, and that they had a list of finalists for the park, and the Smokies wasn't one of the finalists. So they were incensed. They raced out there. They confronted the committee in the Grove Park Inn there. Inn's still there, by the way. Very, very nice place to spend some time. And talked them into at least coming to the Smokies, taking a look at it, and eventually the commission decided to nominate 3 parks: Mammoth Cave, Shenandoah, and Great Smoky Mountains, recommended to Congress to become the next national parks. No money came with that. Not 1 red cent, unfortunately, because every acre of the Great Smoky Mountains was in private hands. 520,000 acres of private land they had to purchase. Congress wasn't going to give a penny, so they had to raise it all themselves. $10 million, which is $184 million in today's dollars. Anybody here ever do any fundraising? Would that be a big ask? That's actually what it was. In today's dollars, $184 million to buy this national park. But they weren't daunted. They broke it down into pieces. They set goals. Locally, they wanted to raise $1 million. They went to the school kids, emptied their pockets of nickels and dimes. Went to the churches. They passed around 1 plate for the park, 1 plate for the church. They went to the hotels, had the bellhops empty their pockets of their tips. They went to the banks. They went to the big factories. They went to the hotel, all the big businesses in town. Eventually got very close to their goal, but the deadline was coming, and the city of Knoxville, of all places, was still $20,000 short on their goal. So the Mayor Ben Morton declared that the city of Knoxville is hereby closed until we get that last $20,000. No church, no sports, no school, no work, no nothing. Within a few hours, they came up with that last $20,000, and now they've reached 10% of their goal, 10%. Then they went to the states, North Carolina and Tennessee. They were reluctant at first, but they kind of sold the idea by saying, you don't have to actually write us a check for $2 million right off, but if he's pledged $2 million, awaiting a match, contingent upon a match, then you can write the check. Of course, the people from the states know, it's like, where are they going to come up with $5 million? So they had half the money. They needed the second half. Their plan was to go to all the rich guys back east and ask them for money. Went to all the rich guys back east, asked them for money. Didn't get 1 red cent, not 1 penny. Fortunately, there was a guy who knew a guy, Arno Cammerer. Had been working in Acadia with John D. Rockefeller Jr. For many years, they'd become close friends, had a great working relationship. They really loved building these carriage roads and the motor roads. Really enjoyed each other. And Cammerer came to Manhattan to meet with Junior, went up to the Standard Oil building there in the financial district, made a call on John D. Rockefeller Jr., and they made him sit in the waiting room for 90 minutes. Junior was just like super busy that day, had all these meetings. He was on every board and committee in the world. Kept him cool on his heels for 90 minutes. Finally, Junior came in, sorry, but maybe we can talk at lunch. I just got like 10 minutes for lunch. Can we talk then? So they got together for lunch. Of course, Cammerer wanted to talk about the Smokies. Junior wanted to talk about carriage roads in Acadia. So they talked about carriage roads in Acadia. Finally, at the end of the lunch, Junior had to go to another meeting, and Cammerer just said, but, you know, what about the Smokies? Junior had never seen the Smokies. You can realize why he wasn't really all that enthusiastic about it. But he said, yeah, the Smokies, yeah, I thought we were going to talk about that. Can you write me a letter? Write me a letter. Tell me about this Smoky Mountain place and what you're trying to do and how much it might cost. So it came down. He had to write a letter, a $92 million letter. The whole future of the Great Smoky Mountains hinged on this letter. Luckily, he was a really good letter writer. And this is what he wrote. And in just a few days, too. And this doesn't only express what the National Park Service wanted to do in the Great Smoky Mountains. It also expressed what they wanted to do in the national parks overall. This was their vision in 1927. The National Park Service had the actual knowledge of what a visit to Western parks meant to the lucky ones. It brought to the individual and his family a breath of the outdoors and a vision of the best that God made in this country, and a realization that a country that is reserving such areas and maintaining them for the benefit of its citizens was a pretty good country to live in. We firmly believe the eastern parks will supply a national need, where those from the congested centers of population, the workers at the machines and in the lofts and the mills, the clerks at the desks, and the average fellow of the small towns. Hi, my name's Steve. I'm an average fellow from a small town. Had away with words. May, at small cost and loss of only a few days' time, get the recreation and inspiration that his more fortunate brothers now get out of a visit to Yellowstone and Yosemite. So their vision was very egalitarian. It was kind of like they wanted everybody to have access to these beautiful places. He also said in his letter that the loggers were cutting 60 acres of old-growth forest a day. Junior really loved old-growth forests, really loved big trees. So it didn't take him long to decide that yes was the right answer. He sent one of his assistants down to Knoxville, never did these things himself, never showed up for any ceremony, any ribbon cutting himself. Checked for $5 million, and the assistant said, the whole city of Knoxville just went wild. They said it was like Armistice Day. People came pouring onto the streets. The train whistles, the factory whistles were all blowing. The church bells were ringing. Every front page of every newspaper was nothing but stories about the Rockefeller donation and the national park. And that was 1928. By 1934, America's most visited national park had become a reality, and the economic vision that they were looking for definitely came true, because we have over 12 million visitors a year in the Smokies, and revenue is around $3 billion a year, which also is the entire, as we know, budget for the National Park Service. Meanwhile, back in Yellowstone, it's 1924, the Rockefellers are on vacation. They're coming to Yellowstone, and the superintendent is there, Horace Albright. Remember, George B. Dorr had worked with Horace Albright, but Junior and Horace Albright had never met. They meet here at the superintendent's office in Yellowstone, and Albright has this crazy scheme. They've only got 3 days to see Yellowstone, but he sends the family all the way from the northern end of Yellowstone to the southern end to and then 20 miles further on bad wagon roads to see the Grand Tetons, because Albright's totally infatuated with adding the Grand Tetons to Yellowstone. He's been working on it for 9 years already, very excited to see the world's richest person show up in his park. So he sends them all the way through the park, all the way 20 miles further south on bad wagon roads. They see the Grand Tetons. They turn around, come back. Albright bushwhacks them on their way out of the park, on their way to Glacier for a 10-day horse packing trip, and wants to hear what their thoughts are about the Grand Tetons. You know, it's really he's like a golden retriever, just panting. What did you think of those Tetons? What did you think of those Tetons? They didn't mention a single word about the Tetons. Not one word. On to Glacier they went, and this is a photo of, supposedly the only photo of Junior with a beard. And there he is up in Glacier after 10 days on horses with Native American guides. And, you know, he's kind of almost smiling. He doesn't look like the old dour Junior anymore. He looks kind of happy there. But 3 weeks after they leave, Horace Albright, superintendent of Yellowstone, gets a letter from Maine, from Junior. And he's thinking, oh, boy, he's going to mention the Tetons. He's finally come to his senses. He's going to help us buy the Grand Teton Mountains. Doesn't mention a word about the Tetons. But he does say, you know, your roadsides look like hell. You know, I just spent 200 miles driving through your park, thanks to you. And, you know, I'm a landscape architect, and this is America's, you know, premier national park. Have you ever thought of cleaning up your roadsides? And he even offers to pitch in a little bit to help with the cost of it. And Albright, being a very wise person, a lot of people, when Junior made these offers, were kind of defensive, like, oh, I don't think our roadsides are so bad. You know, what do you mean? Why are you picking on me? Albright, you know, he immediately jumped on this offer. He told Junior, yep, I was just saying to the missus this morning, I wish we could do something about those roadsides. I get letters every month from visitors saying, your roadsides look awful. What can we do? And he even dispatched a crew out there. They like cleared test strips of a mile here, a mile there, different sections of roadsides, came up with these spreadsheets about how much every foot of roadside it would cost to clean them up, how long it would take, how many workers. And of course, Junior loves details, loves maps, loves blueprints, loves spreadsheets, sends them photos, and they get to work on the roadsides and do great things very economically. They're a great team. They're some of these very productive federal employees. You may not have heard much about them recently, but they do exist. I read a letter from Arno Cammerer to Junior, and it was like Wednesday night, and he'd been in the office since Tuesday morning, worked all day, worked all night, worked all Wednesday. Late Wednesday night, he was finally going home. Very unproductive, I know, but these guys all worked all the time. That's all they did. Had a lot of mental health issues because of that. I don't recommend it, but when people say that, you know, you should find a more productive career, I kind of wonder what they're thinking about. So the Rockefellers come back in 1926. A lot of the roadsides are cleared up. It's such a good job doing that it becomes a model for all the other national parks, how to clean up roadsides. Even state parks start adopting this model. But you know Albright, he's not satisfied to hang around in Yellowstone very long. He gets the family in the cars and heads straight south to the Grand Tetons once again. This time they go into Jackson Hole, which is the area he's really interested in purchasing. And Abby almost immediately says, you know, what is this? You know, this beautiful place, why does all the valley look like heck? You know, it's just like these ruined, failed tourist developments, billboards, burned out gas stations, falling down cabins, hotels, kind of sketchy dance halls. And they even had the nerve of putting all the utility lines between the road and the mountains. So when you take a picture, you always had the utility lines there. So, you know, even Abby said, what would it cost to clean this up? And so Albright felt like he had him where he wanted him now and took him to this place, Hendricks Point, where Ansel Adams took the photo and was looking out over the Snake River and the Grand Teton Mountains, and the sun was setting behind the mountains. And he talked about this grassroots citizens group he'd been working with to buy Jackson Hole, to preserve it as a national recreation area or a park or something, and made this great spiel. And at the end of it, Abby and Junior just didn't say a word. Not one word. However, a couple of weeks later, Junior and Horace Albright, superintendent of Yellowstone, start sending telegrams and letters back and forth, start communicating, start maybe throwing around some figures about what it might cost to do this Jackson Hole thing. Junior invites Albright up to the office in the financial district in Manhattan. And by the way, that image there in the top right, that's Junior and Abby's little townhouse, and 10-story townhouse in Manhattan. He said they were frugal, but for homes, they weren't as frugal when it came to their domiciles. Still gave away a lot more money than they spent themselves, but they had some pretty nice digs. So yeah, so Albright's coming to New York. They're going to meet. They're going to talk about this Jackson Hole thing. And this part of the story is so important, I think we need to dramatize it a little bit. Oh, there's John D. Rockefeller now. And I'll be Horace Albright. Well, good evening, Mr. Rockefeller. These are the 14,000 of acres of land in Jackson Hole we would need to purchase. By working with local realtors and bankers, we estimate the cost to be $400,000. I know that's a tad higher than we discussed.
Mr. Albright, is this all there is?
What do you mean? This is the property we've been working on.
No. That isn't what I had in mind at all. You took us that afternoon to a hill where we looked out over the mountains and the whole valley. I remember you used the word dream. That's the area for which I wanted you to get cost estimates. The family's only interested in an ideal project and would please me very much if you could get me date on that.
But that might cost you as much as $1.5 million or $2 million.
Well, of course. But that is what I'm interested in. I'm only interested in the ideal proposition. I would like to know about the land on both sides of the river and to the north.
Bravo. And so Albright got busy looking at a larger area, getting more estimates, and came back to Junior with his new estimates, which were, again, even higher still. And Junior looked at the maps, looked at the estimates, and just said, we'll do it. And very soon, they started buying up land in Jackson Hole. They got like 25,000 acres pretty quickly, because if you've been out in the Teton area, it's high, it's dry, it's cold. It's a pretty lousy place to raise cattle, truth be known. A lot of people were more than willing to sell. Not everyone, though. For example, Mrs. Geraldine Lucas from Iowa, a widow from Iowa, she had probably through the Homestead Act got like the most beautiful place in all of Jackson Hole, right at the base of the Grand Teton Mountain. And she had this meadow and this cabin, this meandering stream, and even Harold Fabian and the other attorneys buying land knew it was worth a fortune. And they were talking, and Fabian and Mrs. Lucas, and finally Mrs. Lucas said, Mr. Fabian, you come back here and you stack those silver dollars as high as that Grand Teton Mountain, and then I'll talk to you about selling my land. Drove a very hard bargain. She did die a couple of years later, and her son inherited the land, and he sold it right away. So things were going along pretty well at the beginning, until the word got out. They'd formed this shell company, Snake River Land Company, kind of trying to sound like it was a cattle company, not the National Park Service and the world's richest guy trying to buy up their land for obvious reasons. And the cat got out of the bag that it wasn't a cattle company. It was the world's richest guy and the federal government trying to buy up their land, and that really galvanized the opposition. They felt like they'd really been hoodwinked. They demanded a congressional investigation. They brought out congressmen. For some reason, congressmen were willing to leave Washington, D.C. in August, in the days before air conditioning, come to Jackson, Wyoming for a whole week, maybe 2 weeks, investigate, see if there had been any unethical coercion to get people to sell their land. There hadn't been. They didn't find any evidence of that. But also, the same year, 1933, Horace Albright, superintendent of Yellowstone, quits. He's burned out. He's had enough. He can't take it anymore. He's having a lot of problems with depression. And his dream had always just been to be a lawyer, to live in California, to have a family, to have a relatively simple life. So he announced he's going to quit. He does continue to help Junior in the Park Service, but no longer as superintendent and assistant director of the Park Service. So all of a sudden, Junior's kind of lonely guy. Stephen Mathers died. Horace Albright's gone. Cammerer doesn't actually have jurisdiction over the western parks. He's over most of the eastern parks until he becomes director. Feeling kind of lonely, and the opposition is staunch, and for good reason. They weren't bad people. They were very, very opposed to the national park. You know, they were cowboys who loved being cowboys. The U.S. Forest Service was a pain in the butt from the beginning to the end, every day, still to this day. They always resented the creation of the Park Service because the Park Service took their best land and said, look at us, we've got all this beautiful places. It's a national park now. It doesn't belong to the Forest Service anymore. So you can see why they were resentful, and they undermined everything the Park Service tried to do. Westerners just kind of tend to distrust the federal government as a general rule, and there were important tax issues as well. Once land goes from private to public, then you're not paying property taxes on that, so you still have to support your schools. Another 10 years pass, 1943. John D. Rockefeller Jr. still has all this land, like 35,000 acres of land, paying taxes on it, maintaining the roads, maintaining the buildings. It's wasting money. He doesn't like to waste money. He's not a happy camper anymore. So he and Albright actually come up with this scheme, a threat, probably a bluff, because he did something similar in Acadia, that, okay, Congress, you either take this land or I'm going to sell it. Just put it on the open market. Whoever wants to buy it can buy it. And FDR, very brave president, says, okay, I can create the national park tomorrow using the 1906 Antiquities Act created by John Lacey, an Iowan. A magic wand that the president have. Very important conservation tool. He creates Grand Teton National Monument. Problem solved. Yes? Not quite. Not quite. That even galvanizes the opposition more. Because the president, you know, people know that these national monuments are created by the president without congressional support. So they're always kind of iffy. You always get some pushback when you create a national monument. They got a lot of pushback. And they came up with like the most brilliant PR scheme that's ever been enacted. They got Wallace Beery, the very highest paid actor in Hollywood at the time. He was like a Hollywood cowboy. He'd made 2 movies in Jackson Hole. He and his cronies got together and herded like 500 cattle right through the new national monument, you know, breaking all the rules. And of course, you know, Time Magazine was there, the New York Times was there, the movie reels were there. It was all, it looks like another Hollywood production. And America just ate it up. It was in every magazine, every newspaper. And of course, who's America going to side with? The millionaire or the cowboys, you know? The guys with the cool horses, the nice hats, the 6-shooters. Again, they sided completely with the stockmen and the cowboys. Another hard years for Junior. 1943, they actually even came after, in the middle of World War II, they came after the Antiquities Act, Lacey's Act, which they've done before and I'm sure will do in the next couple of years too, trying to dissolve the Antiquities Act. It's such a powerful tool that the president have, you know, Jimmy Carter, all of Alaska, that was the Antiquities Act. Half the national parks were probably created first as national monuments, then they became national parks using the Antiquities Act. They came after the Antiquities Act. Junior was still holding the land, still paying taxes. Looked like it was going to go on forever and ever. Finally, gradually, World War II ended. No more gas rationing, no more tire rationing. Economy's booming. People had money. People wanted to travel. They headed out for all the national parks and all the scenic areas that tourists go to, and completely swamped the Tetons because it never really became a national monument. Wyoming kept blocking it, and it still belonged to Junior and his son Lawrence. They were still managing it, so it was a mess. And people were just driving out in the sagebrush, probably like they're doing right now, and camping out. Town of Jackson, on the other hand, was going gangbusters. I mean, they've never seen so much money in their life. All the hotels were full, the restaurants were full, the bank accounts were ballooning, property values were ballooning. The local people were looking around saying, you know, these tourists are a lot easier to shear than a sheep. And they started coming around, started talking to their elected officials. Maybe we should create like a national monument or something. We need facilities for these people to stay. We need campgrounds and picnic areas and all this. So that's the economic version of how the controversy finally ended. The romantic version is that when Junior and Lawrence had this land for 24 years, they actually managed it like the National Park Service was. Junior knew the National Park Service as well as he knew his own family. He knew what to do. They even did like a historic structure inventory, and they maintained all the historic structures in the park, just like the Park Service was. One of them was Meaner's Ferry, this really cool ferry that before there was a bridge across the Snake River, you had to take this ferry across the really swift, icy waters of the Snake River. All the old-timers really, it was a very, very vivid experience and a very sentimental, cherished experience. So when they found out that it was going to be restored by the Rockefellers, they got really excited. They started coming in. It was Harold Fabian, his wife Josephine, who managed it. Lawrence bankrolled it. This restoration, all the old-timers came in, told their stories, brought in their pictures. The whole valley was really excited about this. They had a grand opening. The governor came, and the head of the Mormon church came. Just everybody who was anybody in Wyoming and Utah in that area came for the grand opening. And the first, all the press was there. The first ferry load of old-timers, the oldest of the old-timers, crossed the Snake River and fortunately didn't capsize because there probably would be no Grand Teton National Park. They made it across, and according to the reporters, there was just tears streaming down their cheeks. They were so happy, and they even said to Lawrence and Fabians that we didn't know you cared about us. We thought it was just us versus them. We thought all you cared about was your stupid park. We didn't know you cared about us and our history, and that really changed things. But that's just a tiny fraction of what Rockefeller did and what the book's about. There's also all these parks, all these museums. One of the things they did recently, about 12 years ago, they'd wisely maintain a little family enclave in the Grand Tetons in Jackson Hole. It was on Phelps Lake. Started out as like 3,000 acres, pretty nice, sizable place. It was just an old dude ranch. It wasn't really fancy. It was the cabins from an old dude ranch, but they kept it. They'd give a few hundred acres every few years to back to the National Park Service till they got down to like 800 acres, and then by this time, just like 2003, 2004, Rockefeller family just loved this place. This was the Rockefellers' primo retreat, and they would go there to get engaged. They would go there for their anniversaries. They'd take their kids there. They'd take their grandkids there. They'd been going on for generations. And then Lawrence announced that he was giving the rest of it to the National Park Service. Family went berserk. Family hated Lawrence. Family still hates Lawrence. They were really shocked. But their loss is our gain, because Janet and I were just there about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's a beautiful place. Now we can go. I mean, I remember when I worked there in my teens, you'd be hiking up Death Canyon, and you'd look down, and on Phelps Lake there was these little cabins, and it was like, that's where the Rockefellers live. We don't get to go there, but the Rockefellers are down there. That's not the case anymore. That's our place now. Phelps Lake's really nice, really popular too, really crowded, really crowded. So in conclusion, Junior spent $800 million in 2025 dollars on the parks. More importantly, he proved how these collaborations, how these partnerships work. Citizens group, the government, a lot of philanthropists don't think of giving things to the government. That's one problem we're having with the national parks right now. There's a lot of philanthropists, there's a lot of money out there. They just don't think of giving it for the national parks. Great Smoky Mountains National Park is closed right now, well, was closed right now because of the government shutdown. But it's actually open because the communities came together, the cities, the counties, the nonprofit friends groups came together, and they scraped up $60,000 a day to keep Great Smoky Mountains National Park open. But that's city money, you know, that's supposed to go for schools and libraries, firemen, police. It's not supposed to go for something that the federal government has the obligation, has already budgeted the money to operate. It's really sick, and that only keeps it going through October 10th. Not an efficient use of government money. Congress should realize that by now. But why am I such a park junkie? Why do I think national parks are so great? Why we need to take care of the ones we have? Why we need to expand the ones we have? Why we have to create more national parks to work on some of this problem of overcrowding? For one thing, they're cost effective. I mean, there's a reason the communities around Great Smoky Mountains National Park decided to kick in money to keep the park open. It's October. It's our busiest time in the Great Smoky Mountains. You know, we've got 30,000 visitors there a day spending money in the local communities. You know, they have to. They don't have any choice. They have to keep it open just for the economics of it. National parks are like $55 billion a year. It costs $3 billion. Actually, that's $2 billion now with the tax cut budgeting on how they would pay for the tax cut. Cut the Department of Interior or the National Park Service budget down to $2 billion. And it supports 400,000 jobs. I mean, national parks make economic sense, biological sense. My home park, Great Smoky Mountains, protects 60,000 different species of plants and animals. And you know, when you protect all those species inside a national park, they really do just fine. There's an occasional problem here and there, climate change being one of them. But it's incredible how well nature does, how it thrives when you just friggin' leave it alone. Of course, all day long, all those plants are taking in carbon dioxide, storing it in their wood, storing it in their roots, putting it into the soil, and giving out oxygen. People love national parks. Makes us happier, healthier, brings people together. That's something we don't acknowledge very often, but the visitor center where I volunteer, it's like the United Nations in there. Almost any time during the day you can hear five or six different languages. People from every state, people of different political groups, people of different faiths. And we have a big, beautiful country. A lot of national parks could be expanded using existing public lands, mostly from the Forest Service. Anybody here from the Forest Service? Good, that's good, yeah. Mostly from the national park. I mean, look at how small Rocky Mountain National Park is. You ever wondered why Rocky Mountain National Park is this teeny little square up in the corner there? It doesn't make any sense. Rocky Mountains are huge. Our parks could be much bigger. And there are good things going on. There's just not enough of them. Katahdin Woods and Water was recently created with the 1906 Antiquities Act, created by John Lacey, by President Obama. The land, however, was all purchased by Roxanne Quimby. Have you ever heard of her? The Burt's Bees woman. She was just a pauper. She and Bert started selling honey on the side of the road, and one thing led to another. She's a brilliant marketing person, and she was making hundreds of millions of dollars. Didn't have anything to do with it. She really didn't want anything more than her cabin in the Maine woods, but she thought it would be good for her community if she created a national park and for the economic stimulus. So she had a hard fight too, bought all this land, but eventually Obama made it a national monument. Purchase Knob at the Smokies, that's a family donated 530 acres contiguous to the park, a beautiful mountaintop land, just because they'd enjoyed it for a long time, and now they were getting on in years, and they didn't want to see it all subdivided up. Wanted to see it go to the park. A group recently gave money for 8,000 acres to add to Okefenokee Swamp. Donated money. Patagonia donated a lot of money for that. And there's a Republican congressman in Florida just introduced an application for a new national park in Florida that would protect the freshwater springs. The national parks really aren't controversial in a lot of ways you would expect. They've always been bipartisan. It's definitely a fight that can be won. People love national parks. That's what's easy about it. Just have to go ahead and do it. You have to contact our elected officials. If you spent an hour a month contacting your elected officials, telling them why national parks are important to you and why you're going to consider voting on national parks, funding for national parks next time you vote, because if there's one thing we know about our elected officials, they love to be what? Re-elected. Yes, they do. You can volunteer at parks, you can give to the Friends Group, you can give to the National Parks Foundations, a lot of interesting park partners where you really get a lot of bang for your buck when you give to these nonprofits, because they actually have more latitude to do things than even the National Park Service does. It's amazing how far your dollars go with your friends groups, your park partners. You can encourage philanthropy from others. You know, does rich Uncle Fred really have to give all his money to his alma mater? We know Fred had a good time there. We know those were good years. But does all the money have to go to Yale? Maybe could a quarter of it go to the national parks? Endowments are a great things to fund, because endowments can fund federal employees. So you can actually hire the gray and green with money from nonprofit endowments. There's your will. You know, you're not going to miss the money. You will be dead. And your legacy will be a beautiful thing. Finally, Aldo Leopold, who was from where? Darn right he was. Here's a quote. "We abuse land because we see it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." That's my program. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you. What a great audience. What a great facility.
So we do have time for a couple of questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and wait for me to bring the microphone, because we are streaming this. We want the folks who are watching to be able to hear this. In the meantime, I will remind you our friends at Prairie Lights are here, and they would love to sell you a book, and I know that Steve would be happy to sign that. So we've got a question here in the back.
When did they introduce, the rangers as caretakers of the parks?
Good question. It started with Stephen Mather and Horace Albright. Horace Albright was a genius. He was the first director of the National Park Service, and before that he was an ad man. He was a public relations guy, and I think that made him just the perfect first director of the National Park Service, because he was not seeing things just strictly from a preservation point of view. He was seeing it as something that the American people would get behind and enjoy. This vision for the national parks which he started, which is still perfect. I mean, just his vision of making them accessible, having these beautiful, well-landscaped roads, having visitor centers, having lodges, having the rangers, the flat hats, the services you get. I mean, it's Roxanne Quimby, when she said, people asked her, well, why do you want your land to become a national park? You know, couldn't it just be like a state park or a nature conservancy area? She said, no, I like the national park brand. People relate to the national park brand. Those rangers, those green uniforms, those visitor centers, those exhibits, those nice picnic areas, everything's very uniform, everything's very, the wayfindings, very good. And if anybody knew brands, it was the Burt's Bee Woman.
Great. Any other questions for Steve before we wrap up tonight? Got one way in the back here. We'll meet in the middle.
Is the Park Service going to face privatizing some of the land for minerals, et cetera?
Yeah, usually they don't get away with it. They always threaten to, Bears Ear National Monument keeps going back and forth. And of course, they came after the Antiquities Act with that. They usually don't get away with it. It's possible. I mean, just the reduction in staff is bad enough, though. It's really dim out there. Just the demoralization of the staff. I mean, all of our friends are park rangers and such, and they come in and Saturday morning they check their email and it says, you've been fired, you've been laid off, you've got 24 hours to vacate your home too, leave the premises, and why don't you go find something more productive to do. Nasty little emails, and actually not only nasty emails, but childish. Like one of them, they said they actually abbreviated the word approximately. Instead of having the time to spell out approximately, they're telling, when they had to do their 5 bullet points, approx 5, number 5, bullets, is how they worded that every federal employee, every 2 or 3 million federal employees had to, at the end of every week, say what they've accomplished with approx 5 bullets.
Wow.
Demoralized.
Yeah.
Demoralized.
All right.
People have given their lives.
Let's end on a happy note. What's your favorite park, Steve?
Good idea. Oh, Great Smoky Mountains is great. Tetons, we're just back there, are great. Grand Canyon, what's not to love. The amazing thing is they're all great. Some of them are a little bit lesser great, but as the world gets uglier, as we continue to make the world uglier and uglier, it just makes our preserves more beautiful and more beautiful. It doesn't take much anymore to be a national park. I'd love to see a prairie national park, wouldn't you? Big, honking prairie national park.
I kind of had a feeling you were going to be able to say just one, so that's very fitting. All right, please help me to thank Steve Kemp for tonight's presentation.
Thank you.
So again, as I mentioned, our friends at Prairie Lights are in the back corner selling books. Steve will stay up here and say hello, sign your books, and chat with you. I wanted to make sure folks grabbed a copy of this program. We have 38 more programs to go, 37 more programs to go this week, so we hope to see you at another one of those yet this week. Thanks for joining us tonight.